Welcome back. Sorry to keep you waiting. If you don't know what I'm on about, this is my second best books of the year list. In my last video, I talked about my 10 best books in translation of 2023, and this is my top 10 English language books of 2023. Every book on this list was written in English and published in 2023. All of them are novels or novellas, no non-fiction, no short stories, keeping it simple. Go check out my other video if you haven't already. I think that's everything. Let's go. At number 10 is North Woods by Daniel Mason. This is a phenomenal piece of historical fiction by an amazing American author, which essentially tells the story of the United States. It's a book that begins in the early years of colonization and leads us up to the present day. But everything is told from the perspective of a single house. We begin with a Puritan couple who run away together, frolic in the fields, they're in love and they're happy, and they end up spending their lives in this cabin. From here, we follow the lives of different people who have lived in this cabin across centuries. There's an English soldier who one day puts his rifle down because he has a vision that he wants to open up an apple orchard and make that his life, and he does it in this cabin. Then we follow his daughters after he's died. The two of them are middle-aged spinsters. One of them has a bit more luck with men than the other, and their story gets really dark and gothic and strange. Then we follow a painter several decades later, who is corresponding with a friend of his who is a writer traveling around Europe. And we find out that these two are actually lovers. They both have wives, but they have this almost unrequited love for each other. The stories in this book are half written in an epistolary style and half written in traditional prose. And we flip back and forth between those two styles, and it works brilliantly to captivate you. As I've said in previous videos, I don't think this book is perfect. I enjoyed the second half a lot less than the first half. I just didn't like the people and the stories that were covered in the second half. But the first half, by itself, is one of the most incredible things I've ever read. And you might not feel that way about the second half. Great, good for you. That just means you get to enjoy it even more than I did. And I enjoyed it enough to put it in my top 10 of this year. Number 9 is Looking Glass Sound by Katrina Ward. I was lucky enough a few months ago to meet Kat Ward. She told me she watched my review of Looking Glass Sound and she loved it. I'm gonna gloat a little bit here and say that she told me that she was amazed at how much I got what she was trying to do, and I kind of understood her writing and her themes, and honestly that made my year. Katrina Ward is an amazing writer. She's an American author who lives in the UK, and I have adored all of the books of hers that I've read. The Last House on Needless Street remains one of my favourite novels, and Looking Glass Sound is an incredible piece of thriller fiction. Little Mary Wollstonecraft was crying outside the room, so I had to bring her in. She's probably going to go crazy in a second. Mwah. Where was I? Looking Glass Sound. Amazing thriller. It's a novel that's kind of separated into 3 distinct parts. Part 1 tells the story of a young teenage boy who spends 2 summers at a seaside town in Maine with his parents in a house they've inherited. There he meets a boy and a girl that he becomes fast friends with, but there is some kind of dangerous stalker on the loose, a man who keeps breaking into people's homes, taking photos of their children and silently threatening them without actually doing any harm, and it's really creepy and horrible. That's the first third of the book, and all of that kind of gets resolved, and then in the second third we follow our protagonist as he's at university. He meets a guy called Sky. You wanna get down? And our protagonist has been writing the story of the first part of the novel as a memoir, and Sky steals it and publishes it as a novel. And then I won't tell you what happens in the third part. But this is a novel about storytelling. It's a novel about how we tell our tales. It's a story about fact and fiction blurring together. What is truth? What is not? How we separate our real lives from the fiction around us. How history is told. How stories are told. Big questions about all that stuff, and it's fantastic. Are you okay? She's okay. I was amazed by this book. Katrina Ward is incredible, and I think she's really pushed herself to her limits here with Looking Glass Sound. It's something else. Okay, I've had to put the cat back outside because she almost managed to climb the tripod. Anyway, number 8 is In Memorium by Alice Wynne. I just got through reading this book and making a video about it because I had a feeling it would end up on my top 10 just based on the hype that it had garnered, and I was right. It's number 8. In Memoriam is an historical novel set during World War I, predominantly in the trenches. Our protagonists are a pair of schoolboys named Gaunt and Elwood. The two of them are both under recruitment age, which during World War I, at least at the beginning, was age 19. But they both end up in the trenches, as so many boys under the recruitment age managed to do, and a lot of them died doing it. We're following these two and obviously hoping that they survive. And to vest our interests in them even more, these two are also secretly in love with each other. They have been for many years, all the way through school together. They are two posh public school boys, and each one has never been able to confess his feelings for the other because of the time and place in which they live. Once they get to the trenches, as the blurb gives away, they will eventually be able to confess their feelings to each other and start their romance, which only makes us worry more about the two of them surviving. But In Memoriam isn't just a tale of survival, it is a beautiful story that puts at its forefront characters and style. The way in which Alice Wynne writes this book is alluring. The language, the tone of it, the way she evokes the feeling and the vibe of the time, the ways in which people spoke during that time, the ways in which they wrote their letters and communicated with each other. It is a true time capsule. It really feels like one of the most immersive experiences of traveling through time to this particular place. And you don't want to be in this particular place. These are the trenches of World War I. It is a terrifying and stressful place. But this is a beautiful love story. A story of, for the time, kind of forbidden love. And Alice Wynne has created something, against all odds, incredibly beautiful here. I adored In Memoriam. Number 7 is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. A book which, as I said in my video on it, has become one of my favourite horror novels of all time. Chuck Tingle is a strange, anonymous writer of weird stuff. He self-publishes a lot of comedy erotica about concepts like people having sex with time itself or with the idea of money. It's wild, it's wonderful, and his whole philosophy is about love. That's what Chuck focuses on with all of his writing, is love itself, love conquering all things. He claims that he has travelled between dimensions and across all of time and space. Everything that is ever true is love. That's the one constant, the one truth. And he's put that into an amazing horror novel, which is set in the modern day in a rural part of Montana, where there is this evangelical cult who run a conversion therapy camp. Our protagonist is a teenage girl. At the beginning of the novel, her parents, despite being very prudish and conservative, tell her that she could go for it with this boy if she wants to. If she wants to have sex with this boy that really likes her, she should do it. She should sow her oats and just go crazy. And she doesn't understand why her parents are encouraging her to go off and fornicate with this young lad who clearly fancies her. And while they're having this strange conversation, she throws up flies all over their dining table. And then she starts seeing visions of a strange demon that stands in the dark corner of their living room, that watches her when she sleeps, that even appears at a house party she attends. This demon is wearing a red polo shirt and a metal collar around its neck, and no one else can see it, even though during the house party it manages to kill someone. What the hell is going on to our protagonist? Why are her parents acting strangely? Why did she throw up flies? What is this demon thing wearing what looks like a Pizza Hut uniform? What's going on? This has to have something to do with the conversion therapy camp. The book is called Camp Damascus. And of course it does, but I'm not going to tell you any more. This is one of the most amazing pieces of queer fiction, of horror fiction, that I have ever been lucky enough to read. If you love horror, if you love queer stories, and if you love stories that are ultimately about love, Chuck Tingle's Camp Damascus is a masterpiece of horror fiction. At number 6, which is kind of a surprise to me, is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, or as she called herself for this particular publication, Rebecca F. Kuang. This has been a kind of year of turnaround for me because I didn't like Kuang's The Poppy War, I didn't read its sequels, and I heard very mixed things about Babel. But Yellowface just seemed too tempting to pass up, so I bought it on a whim, and I ended up loving it. I actually read this 350-page novel in 24 hours. I could not stop devouring this incredible thriller. And after finishing it, I went out and I read Babel for myself, and it turns out Babel is actually a masterpiece of incredible anti-colonialist dark academia, historical, wonderful fantasy-ness. It's amazing. But this isn't about Babel, this is about Yellowface, an amazing thriller about racism in a lot of really compelling ways. Our protagonist is a young white woman who has had very, very, very mild, almost invisible success with a debut indie novel that she wrote. Her closest friend, however, is an enormously successful author. The two of them went to Yale together. This author is a Chinese-American writer whose work is being turned into a Netflix show. The two of them are celebrating that. While they're celebrating, they get drunk together, they go back to the Chinese author's home, where she confesses to our protagonist that she's written this manuscript, this secret thing that is going to be her great magnum opus, an amazing war novel. It's about race, it's about a group of Chinese labormen who fought for the British in the trenches of World War I and no one knows they exist, and it's going to be her great work. And then she chokes to death on a pancake while she's drunk, and our protagonist takes and steals her manuscript, finishes it, and publishes it, and passes it off as her own work. This is a novel about plagiarism. It's a novel about whitewashing. But it's also a lot more than that, because we are in her head, we are following her through this story as she's trying to avoid the plagiarism allegations that inevitably come up, and she's constantly trying to jump over them, push them down, avoid them, run away from them. And because we're in her head, and Rebecca Kuang does a really good job of actually making her almost sympathetic despite being the villain of the piece, you almost feel bad for her. But she's a bad guy, she's the bad guy. And you're excited to see what happens to her, but Kuang is also exploring the effects of social media on us, and also the problematic elements of positive discrimination, of rainbow capitalism. I could talk about it forever. Go watch my video. I loved Yellowface. I thought it was incredible. There's so much about it that I adored. R.F. Kuang writes an amazing thriller that talks so much about race and plagiarism and social media, racist dynamics within capitalism, within industries, including publishing. There's so much here, and I loved it. Number 5 is Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I have talked before about how Adjei-Brenyah has written some of my favorite short stories of all time, and his debut novel is something very, very special. This will go down in history as one of the great works of intensely political science fiction / dystopian fiction, alongside things like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Brave New World, The Handmaid's Tale. Chain Gang All-Stars will be spoken about amongst those novels. I'm not joking. This is a piece of science fiction / dystopian fiction about either a near future or an alternate now, where the American prison system has taken itself even further in the world of capitalism and has started to broadcast a TV show where inmates fight for survival. The American prison system is already a capitalist industry. It is a for-profit thing. It is corrupt, it is racist, and it exists to make money. It is a dark thing that I only barely understand. And Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah has taken that truth and created an amazing dystopian novel about racism, about prejudice, and about turning impoverished, vulnerable, destitute people into profit. It's horrible. It's undeniably reminiscent of Battle Royale and the Hunger Games just because it's about a gladiator arena, and our protagonists are two black women who are also in love with each other and are fighting in this gladiator arena to try to survive at the very least. And the thing is that there are only two ways that you get out of this situation. You fight for 3 years, you survive, you win your final match and you earn your freedom, or you die trying. That's it. We follow these two women who are in a relationship and are fighting for their survival in this disgusting arena where prison inmates who have no rights at all and are disproportionately part of racial minorities. Wait, that sentence was really long. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, we watch them duke it out, we watch them fight for their survival, we feel terrible for doing so, and we think about how the prison system is a corrupt capitalist industry. It is a dark, harrowing book that will make you scream and cry, and it is a masterpiece. At number 4 is The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. I was very, very hyped for this book because I loved Matrix so much, and The Vaster Wilds I think is even better. This is a remarkable piece of historical fiction. It tells the story of a nameless girl who was originally born and raised in London. She worked there until she was forced by her boss, who effectively is also kind of her owner because she has no other options, to move across the ocean to Jamestown, Virginia, to keep working for him and living there until a famine starts killing everyone in Jamestown one by one. The novel actually begins with her running out into the wilderness in the middle of the night alone, cold and half-starved. And as the novel goes on, we learn about her past, the things I've just told you. We gradually learn about where she came from, how she ended up here, and the famine itself. But there was a particular catalyst, some thing that happened, some moment where she decided to run, to go out alone into the night, into the dark. And we don't learn what that is until the very end of the novel. And so much of this book is just her wandering. She thinks, she remembers, and we're there for all of it. We see what she sees, we experience what she experiences. She waxes philosophical about things. She ponders on God and the nature of existence. She marvels at the beauty of the landscape that she sees. And we see it all. We feel all of it. It's an incredibly immersive novel. One of the most engaging and intense pieces of fiction I think I've ever read. Over and over in my video on it, I called it immersive because I felt lost in the mind and the body and the experiences of this single person as she just wanders through the wilds. It's remarkable, beautifully written, beautifully expressed, perfectly paced, perfect length, perfect everything. An amazing novel. Number 3 is The Glutton by A.K. Blakemore, which when I first read it I thought might end up being my number 1, but not quite. A.K. Blakemore's debut novel, The Manningtree Witches, is one of my favourite historical novels, and now The Glutton is even better. It's even higher up on that list for me. The Glutton tells the story of a real guy who really did exist, a Frenchman named Tarare, who, according to the records, was able to eat anything. He was a scrawny guy with a bottomless appetite who ate a lot of weird and horrible things in his day, up to and including possibly a human baby. And we follow his life. This novel is his story, right from his birth to his death. The framing device of the novel is him on what we think is his deathbed. He is sick in hospital and he's not getting better, and he tells his story to this nun who is repulsed by him but does her duty and looks after him as much as she's kind of comfortable with doing. We learn about him growing up in a small village in France. We learn about how he ended up getting to Paris and kind of doing some street performance stuff before even becoming a soldier after the French Revolution. We see the French Revolution through his eyes after he gets to Paris. It's an amazing story of a lot of things that happen, but what's interesting is, as I said in my video, these things happen around Tarare. He is kind of a victim of so many things. A victim of circumstance, a victim of class, a victim of family and his culture and the people around him. Things happen to him and he has very little agency. And that's kind of fascinating. The one thing he ever really does for himself is eat a lot of weird stuff. It's a book that has had me thinking about its themes and its message a lot. If you want to see what I thought about all that stuff, you can go watch my video about how this book seems to be about the concept of place and where we all belong. It really had me thinking, and it continues to have me thinking. I'm going to have to reread it soon to continue to mull over the themes and ideas and philosophies that Blakemore is presenting to us. There's a lot to dig into here, and Blakemore is a poet. Her command of language is staggering. It is beautiful, and you see it all the way through The Glutton. An amazingly stunning book, and it easily has my favourite cover of 2023. No book cover even comes close. It's perfect. It's amazing. I love this book. Number 2, and this kind of took me by surprise, is Penance by Eliza Clark. At the time of recording this, I still haven't read her first book, Boy Parts, but her second novel, Penance, is a true masterpiece. It is a kind of anti-crime novel, a piece of metafiction that makes it sound pretentious. but it works, and it works incredibly well. Penance is a book about a lot of different things relating to our social politics and dynamics of today, and the entire novel is framed as a piece of true crime non-fiction from a discredited author, a man who's been involved in scandals and has been cancelled multiple times, and he ended up writing a book called Penance, based on a true thing that really happened. This true crime was the murder of a teenage girl by other teenage girls in her class. The book's opening chapter tells the story of that crime and how it supposedly played out as these girls lured their victim to a beach hut. The book is set in a small town on the English coast. There they tortured her, doused her in petrol, and set her alight. It's horrific. It is the most harrowing opening chapters of any book you could ever read. And as I said, the entire novel is framed as if it's a piece of non-fiction by this guy who doesn't really exist. And after he sets the scene and tells us the story of the murder, he then takes us on a journey of interviews, social media posts, investigative journalism, to paint a picture of the murderers. We look at each of these three girls, their lives from their perspectives and the perspectives of their mothers, their families, their friends, blah blah blah. We get a huge sense of this whole area, the community, the atmosphere, all building up to this murder and the aftermath. And of course, the only person that we should really hear from is the girl who died, and we can't do that. And that's partly what this book is exploring, the fact that the dead cannot speak. There's a lot going on with Penance. Again, check out my review. I had a lot of thoughts, and I will have even more if I read it again. I really think there's a lot that I missed or a lot that I didn't talk about. But Penance is a lot. It is a lot of a book. It is remarkable that Eliza Clark actually managed to pull this off because it has so many moving parts and so many big ideas, and she did it. She did it so well. It's remarkable, a true masterpiece of metatextual pseudo-anti-fiction. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's wildly brilliant. Now, when I first read this book, my #1 English language book of 2023 and my favourite book of 2023 full stop, I had no idea how anything else could top it. When I read things like Penance and The Glutton and a few things on my books in translation list, a lot of them came close. But in the end, nothing could beat this. Nothing could top this book, which I had a feeling would be my book of the year, and it is. It has remained at the top of my list. This is now one of my favourite science fiction novels of all time. It is a remarkable piece of speculative fiction. It's a masterpiece. It's perfect. I love it more than I could say. Nothing has ever affected me like this novel. This is In Ascension by Martin McInnes, my favourite novel of 2023. In Ascension is a sci-fi novel that at its heart is exploring that thing that Carl Sagan famously said: we are all made of star stuff. In Ascension is set just a few years from now. Our protagonist is a Dutch woman from Rotterdam called Lee. Lee is a biologist, and when the novel begins, she is sent as part of a crew on an expedition to explore a deep sea vent, a new vent that has been discovered that may be deeper than anything that the ocean has to offer. And they're all wondering what could live in this vent. They're wondering if the life they find in this vent might answer so many questions to do with evolution. Namely, how we went from single-celled organisms to what we are today, the origins of consciousness, the origins of the tree of life. Big, big questions. And that's only where the book begins. Based on what they discover there, Lee ends up in the Mojave Desert, where she's working for a new NASA-style space agency. In this world, a new fuel source has been created that might allow for interstellar travel, where we can travel much further and much faster than we ever could before out into space. And this novel, as the blurb gives away, will eventually take Lee herself out into space for some reason. She will arrive at the furthest reaches of our solar system, but I'm not going to tell you why. This is a novel that takes us from a deep sea vent to beyond Pluto, and the things that are discovered, the things that are explored, the things that might be possible, it all circles back around to this idea that we are all made of star stuff. I am genuinely getting emotional talking about the beauty of this book. A novel that explores the smallest possible things and the largest, most distant things. Great mysteries of life, big and small, and how they all connect to us, how everything is a cycle, everything is a web that is perfectly connected, that there is mystery in everything and in nothing because everything is everything. It's so beautiful. In Ascension is one of the greatest novels I have ever read, especially within the science fiction genre. A perfect piece of speculative fiction, a masterpiece on so many levels. I moved to Glasgow this year and Martin McInnes lives in Edinburgh, and I don't know what he looks like, but if ever I meet him I will faint. The incredible thing that he's done here. It's spellbinding. I'm really amazed and I'm really grateful to him for creating such a perfect novel. In Ascension is my book of the year. There you go, those were my top 10 English language books of 2023. If you haven't already, go check out my top 10 books in translation of the year, and my next video will be my top 20 albums of the year. This is not a music channel, but I love music and you can't stop me. If you've enjoyed what I've been doing this year, if you've enjoyed my channel, if you love what I do and you think I'm good at it, feel free to give me a Christmas present by supporting me on Patreon. I'd really, really appreciate it. And subscribe for books.